Okay, so today's conversation is going to be Boundaries Bootcamp, and it's all about learning how to train other people to treat us with respect, physically, emotionally, mentally. It's a solution to chronic people pleasing. It's all about learning to say no in order to take care of ourselves better and to find clarity and a path forward for situations in which we experience constant disrespect. Okay, it's very, very relevant to many, many people. Now, what we want to do is we want to kind of have everyone do a little bit of a self-assessment to know how relevant is this subject to you right now. All right, so we're going to go through the little bit of a boundaries assessment. And what I want you to do is we're going to score each statement on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 means almost never, 2 means occasionally, 3 about half the time, 4 fairly often, and 5 all the time. Okay. Statement number 1 is I experienced resentment. I experienced resentment. So you can just write this down for yourselves. You don't have to share this with anybody, but I just want you to kind of get clarity on the relevance of this to yourself. So score 1 to 5. Do you almost never experience resentment? Occasionally, about half the time, fairly often, all the time. Okay, score that statement 1 to 5. That's a big sign of having our boundaries be crossed. Number 2 is I am being treated with disrespect or unkindness. Score that 1 to 5.
Repeat.
I am being treated with disrespect or unkindness. One means almost never, 5 means all the time. Scoring it somewhere on that continuum. So right now you should have a score that's out of 10. So number 3 is I feel my physical or emotional boundaries are being violated. So physical boundaries could be someone coming over uninvited or some other way violating physical boundaries. So score that 1 to 5. I feel my physical or emotional boundaries being violated. Number 4, I am constantly pressured to accommodate another person's needs and wants. I am constantly pressured to accommodate another person's needs and wants. And number 5 is my needs and feelings are being dismissed or ignored. My needs and feelings are being dismissed and ignored. An example of this might be being in a relationship and your feelings don't really matter in that relationship. Everything is all about the other person, right? So at this point, you add them all up and you've got your score out of 25. The relevance of your score is this is a benchmark, okay? If you have a really high score, don't get down on yourself. That means you have a even greater opportunity to make an improvement in this aspect of your life. And things should only be getting better with right understanding. And that's where we're going today. So let's get clear on what does it mean to set boundaries? What does it mean to set boundaries? Anyone have any thoughts? What does it mean to set boundaries? You might say it's the limits on what we will not do, what we will not tolerate, or what we will not accept. It could be, finding out what makes you happy, healthy, and safe, and then letting others know and sticking to it. The key thing with boundaries is it's not about other people changing their behavior, but determining how you will alter your behavior. A boundary is not about anybody else being different. It's only about how you are willing to show up differently. It's basically like establishing clear guidelines on what is acceptable and what is not, right? A way of expressing your needs and limits. So one thing we really want to get clear on, one of the main reasons people don't set boundaries is they don't want it bad enough. They aren't motivated enough yet. They haven't seen the importance of setting healthy boundaries in life. What we want to do collectively, we want to come up with a number of compelling reasons why this is an absolute must. The motivation level has to be high in order to properly carry out boundary setting. Because a lot of times people just don't have the motivation and they suffer through it. So let's get some ideas out there. Why should setting boundaries be a top priority? Let's pretend like we're all on a game show and we all win the big prize if we win this argument. We want to come up with motivating, compelling arguments. Why is setting boundaries a top priority? Who has some thoughts on this?
I would say to optimize a relationship.
Yeah, it helps build healthier relationships. When we set clear boundaries, we're communicating our needs and expectations, and that helps build healthier, more fulfilling relationships. And we can't possibly be loved for who we are unless we're willing to reveal who we are. So this is all about connecting with people on a different level. So that's a good one. It helps us build healthier relationships. Who else has an idea? Why is this an absolute must? Carrie?
Yeah, I think setting boundaries allows you to respect yourself, but it also teaches other people how to respect you.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, it protects us.
Mm-hmm.
It helps us identify and avoid relationships or situations that aren't good for us. Usually the people who cross boundaries in many cases are simply not mature enough to improve their behavior on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be acting like this if they had that self-awareness. We have to train other people how to treat us a little bit like dog training. I said it, but it's a little bit like dog training, really. Because a lot of times people crossing boundaries is because they're living on whim, instinct, impulse, and egocentricity. And they're just not seeing things from a higher perspective. Excellent. Great answer. Patty, you've got a lot of good ones here.
Brendan?
Yep.
Is it possible for someone to have good boundaries and violate other people's boundaries at the same time?
Yep. It is.
So you could have a hard time because you violate their boundaries immediately, but they have no problems violating yours.
Yep. Yeah, you'll see that all the time. Absolutely. That's very common. It's, people will dish things out, but they can't take it. People treat other people in ways that they won't allow others to treat them. Like you'll notice it's very common, actually. Very, very common. Excellent. Patty, you had some good answers about self-respect and self-worth. Do you care to expand on your thoughts there?
Well, just for those viewing now and later, I'm eating. So I just don't want to be rude. That's why I'm putting my food.
Thank you for taking care of you.
So I'm setting some boundaries for myself.
Good.
But setting boundaries is a form of self-care. And, I'm just piggybacking off of what Carrie said about, the ways in not only respecting yourself, but like Carrie said, it teaches others how to respect you, the whole dog training thing you mentioned. And then it reduces codependency because and as a result creates autonomy in relationships. So that's just a couple of things that I was thinking about.
Yeah. And to add on that, the lousier you feel about yourself, the more lousy treatment you will accept from others. So people will often manipulate you by personally attacking you and crossing boundaries to lower your self-worth, so you'll accept their lousy treatment. That's where we can get caught in a cycle. And this often happens. So someone might stay in a toxic relationship because they've been made to feel so lousy about themselves. They feel they deserve the poor treatment. And, so the subconscious mind will always soften the situation. Oh, it's not that bad. He's not as bad as he used to be. It could be worse. Some people have way worse relationships. And there's a lot of justifying poor treatment, right? Once we start to lower our self-respect and self-worth. So yeah, those are some good ideas. Joel, did you have anything to add? Charmaine, anything to add? Dave?
It's all been kind of covered, but I think that a lot of it just goes, how do you allow other people to treat you? Because sometimes you can end up being a doormat. I mean, I saw that when my mom got married to a guy that was really not a nice guy. And, you know, she kind of just pulled back into that victim mentality and just kind of got walked all over. And you have to, like Patty said, you have to learn to respect yourself and set those boundaries for what you will and won't tolerate.
Yeah. And I would actually submit that when you set boundaries, it's good for others. Because if you set healthy boundaries, it discourages them from becoming more reckless. If you let them get away with bad treatment, they tend to only get worse over time. If you start to set boundaries on them, it's actually good for them to keep them in check. And also, it just helps us have more joy in life. It reduces stress and anxiety, because when we don't set boundaries, we are constantly at the mercy of immature beings. We're constantly at the mercy of immature people. So, okay, so now what we're going to do is address the resistance to the idea of setting boundaries. So this is all about any inner resistance we have to the whole concept of setting boundaries. We want to break ourselves out of the spell that keeps us caught in the suffering. And so we want to be able to come to see that some of these attitudes are not a good idea. Now, number one reason people have a resistance to setting boundaries is lack of knowledge on how to set boundaries. They're like, I just don't know what to say or do. All right. So it's lack of assertiveness. And that's a bad idea, because we're allowing ourselves to stay complacent in confusion, which just lets people walk all over us and makes them think it's okay. A better mindset is to acknowledge that we can figure out how to communicate boundaries clearly and find a way to deal with what comes next. That's the attitude shift we have to have. Instead of saying, I don't know how to set boundaries, it's like, I can figure it out and I can deal with what comes next. Okay, so that's reason number one. Number two is fear of rejection. Some people fear that setting boundaries will lead to rejection, abandonment, disappointing others, whatever it is. And so we'll put up with all kinds of unwholesome behavior. We betray ourselves, we betray our own values. And a lot of times there's a fear that the relationship isn't strong enough to hold if we set boundaries. Okay. So instead of facing that possibility head on, that we might have to make a bigger decision about the nature of this relationship, we'll just get into a toxic loop of saying and doing whatever we can to avoid ruffling any feathers. Okay. The key attitude shift on fear of rejection is to realize that rejection is not the end of the world. It's just rejection is a deflection to who your true people are and where you belong right now and what lessons you need to learn next. Sometimes good things fall apart, so something better can fall together. All right. So that's a healthier attitude to have with rejection. Otherwise, the fear of rejection will keep us in that spell of suffering. And I tell people, don't forget who you are and what you have to offer. And it's a privilege and honor for you to be in anybody's life. And if somebody can't appreciate you, next. So the next one is fear of discomfort is number 3. We get concerned we'll make others mad. It'll come off a little harsh if we set boundaries, and then, so that the key thing to think about here is that if we're afraid of the little bit of discomfort of setting a boundary, it only leads to an endless cycle of discomfort, as we often give a knee-jerk yes response out of obligation and people pleasing. We don't know how to say no, and we train ourselves to back down from those who keep crossing boundaries. The key thing to know is that we can stand our ground and embrace short-term discomfort, because a greater discomfort awaits us if we don't set boundaries. Just think how much more pain there will be if we don't do this, rather than thinking about the pain of doing this, right? And then, and just think about long-term resentment. So another thing to think about is if people don't respect us, what's the point? Find the people who do. It's so freeing to admit that a situation or relationship no longer serves us and walk away with grace, right? And then number 4 reason is guilt or shame. Some people feel like it's important to prioritize others' needs over their own. So they let other people get away with all kinds of inappropriate behavior, which isn't good for them. And they feel like it's selfish to set boundaries. But we need to realize that this is a bad idea, because then we end up in chronic people pleasing, which leads to chronic resentment. You know, it shuts us down, makes us feel lousy. The lousier we feel, the more lousy treatment we accept. And a better mindset here is that your needs matter. The world is better off when your needs are met, because you can show up better, you can love and support people better, help people better, and serve your mission better. It's better for all involved, right? You can't fulfill your virtuous mission in this life if you're depleted all the time because you don't value your own needs. So when your own needs are honored, you're more creative and happier. So it's best for all involved, okay? So now, are there any other limiting beliefs or excuses or fears around setting boundaries anyone can think of that doesn't fit into one of those 4? So we've got lack of knowledge on what to do, fear of rejection, fear of discomfort, guilt or shame.
I would just add, and I don't know if I'd add it as like a 5th or as a subcategory, but I think a lot of that is pride too, though, right? Of like, I'm the only one that can help. I'm the only, right? Instead of the humility of, I can't do everything for everybody all the time, right? We just can't. And you alluded to that with our health and having to take care of ourselves. And, you know, if someone had asked me to help, you know, move them over the weekend, I would have said, absolutely not. I can barely walk. I can't, I'm sorry, you got to find somebody else. In a couple weeks from now, when my back's fine and I'm, you know, more limber and all that, I'd be happy to, but I can't, I'm on the floor on a heating pad. I can't do that to myself for 5 days to go help one person move.
Out of pride.
Out of pride,
yeah,
right?
You call on me, I'm there, dude. Yeah.
Right. You know, and the thing is that we kind of have to let go of this, and especially guys, right? It's kind of that I'm the one that fixes stuff. You ask me, I'm there no matter what, whatever. But the reality is, like, we want to, but we can't, right? Like, just sometimes you just can't do that. And I think maybe almost kind of with the guilt is like a guilt/pride of, I have to, if I am not, then I'm not following the Bible or the whatever that I am supposed to be out there helping people all the time. Yep. And, you know, any Yogananda, any of those teachings, right? And so that's, service is important, but so is saying no, or so is allowing other people to serve you as a flip side, right, to pride. So just as you were thinking that, you know, it made me kind of think of pride and how we talked about that with the 7 deadly sins, right? Pride is a big part of a lot of that, but it's also can be detrimental on the good side of our mission and what we're trying to do to help people.
Yeah. And a big way that this will play out is somebody having the attitude, I need to be the saving hero for everybody.
Right.
And that's the rescuer role in the drama triangle. And we need to realize we are not the only path to salvation. And sometimes suffering is the very medicine people need in order to heal and get better, and heal the ego with some healthy humility and get better. And we are not the only path to salvation. And a lot of times when we're trying to help, we are completely unqualified. So when we're trying to help all these people that have narcissistic tendencies and they're doing gaslighting and all other forms of manipulation, and we're trying to stay in this situation and trying to help them, and they've got substance abuse issues and everything else, it's like, hold on, last time I checked, you didn't have a triple PhD in psychology. Who are you to think that you actually have the skills to help this person? This person doesn't need a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a husband, a wife. This person needs a therapist. That's honestly what people have to come to realize at some point. It's like, that's why we suffer and we're staying in these situations, is because sometimes we have to swallow some humble pie and realize like there's somebody better to do this job than me, right? Excellent. Well said. Well said. Let's go into setting boundaries now, the actual like tactics of it. So this is the steps to setting boundaries. We want to clarify what matters to you. Like, what do you want less of in your life? What do you want more of? What situations make you feel disrespected? What specific behavior should we set boundaries on? You know, so what I want to just throw out there is, can anyone think of any examples of behavior we should set a boundary on? I'll start. Here's one. Lying. We should just set a boundary on lying. People lie to us and should be like, hey, look, I'm going to set a boundary on that. People lie. I'm not going to let them just get away with lying, you know? So that's one. Why don't we go around? Just put up your hand if you have an idea on any type of behavior we should set a boundary on. Coots.
I was going to say anger. I tend to shut that down, but I guess
Yeah,
not,
so-
like, not around me.
So people getting moody,
Sure.
angry tone of voice, you could set a boundary on that if people are going to use that kind of tone with you. Steve, did you have a thought?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, because this is kind of, you know, newer phase for us, but you know, like I've got 3 adult kids, you know, they're not living in my house anymore. So we've got certain boundaries on our house as far as, you know, things that are going to be done, that kind of thing, you know, what we will and won't tolerate. And one of the ones that I'm having to work through with my daughter a little bit is, okay, you bring your son over and he drops, you know, crackers on the ground and steps on it. You need to pick that up, not me. That's not my responsibility unless I am babysitting him, right? And you can't just come in and leave a tornado wreck in my house and leave because you're an adult and you have to respect my house and my rules. And so when I am at her house, I make sure that, you know, dinner's done. I help whatever I expect of her, I offer to her. So dinner's over, I wash my dishes, put them in the dishwasher, whatever the case is. I'll put something away, clean up a mess if I make it. But, you know, I had to get real with her a little bit about a week ago of, look, you do this frequently. I didn't say always because it's not absolute, but you do this frequently. And I need you to not do this, right? Because it's disrespectful, you know, to me in my house to come in and behave like that. And when I say, oh, hey, Bentley, you just dropped, you know, your crackers, mommy's going to have to pick that up. That's your signal to get over there and pick up that damn cracker so I don't have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Okay.
this is like new territory for us, right? Because I mean,
Okay,
he's our
So
he's
this
our
will be a
third
good,
grandkid,
when we
but
get
yeah.
into how to set a boundary, I'll help you craft a new phrase you can use that will go over smoothly.
Nice.
Because sometimes, man, I love your passion. Sometimes your passion might come off a little intense for some people. Like, sorry, man, it's just crap.
Hey, I'm setting boundaries. If you can't handle it, get the hell out of here.
It's like, you know.
Here's my circle of trust. And if you don't like anger, you can go outside.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Who else has an idea on any type of behavior we could set a boundary on? Carrie, do you have any thoughts on any type of behavior we could
Yeah,
set?
I was going to say, setting boundaries around where you spend your time and energy. So being kind of, you know, like if someone want, you know, just being careful about what you allow or what you sort of, how you set that up before you get into a meeting or whatever. There's a zillion things, right? Where you need to be, I think, I do anyway, with some people, not everybody, but people in my life where I'm like, okay, I know I need to time box this and be able to sort of extract myself.
Yeah. So you might even say, I'm going to set a boundary on low quality conversations, right? Or low quality social get-togethers. You know, it's like whatever that means to you. I don't want to judge what low quality is. It's all relative, right? But you know, we could set boundaries on that stuff for sure. For sure. Great example. Charmaine.
And just
Oh, was that Patty talking?
I just wanted to say real quick, because Carrie had brought this up and it's such a great point, is, you know, we talk about having boundaries with others, but having self boundaries are really good. And she mentioned one of those, but something even as practical as sticking to your budget, you know, setting a boundary with your spending and, limiting your screen time, sticking to an eating lifestyle, that is healthy for you, on not working after certain hours, so there are a lot of boundaries that we can put on ourselves. Allows us to have no boundaries with other people because we don't even know how to set boundaries for ourselves.
Yeah. And there's a good carryover with that. The more you respect yourself, the more respect you will be inspired to request from others, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of what Carrie had, sparked off with in the beginning was, there's that self-respect and allows others to respect you too.
Yeah. Excellent.
I wanted to add something.
Yes.
I'd mentioned that my mom had remarried a guy that unfortunately was a drug addict and was very violent. And I would say just seeing people go through that, definitely if people get aggressive or violent, that should definitely be like an instant red flag boundary, either I'm gone or this happens again and I'm gone, but definitely not to tolerate that. And going back to what Patty said, for me, social media is a big one. Like I use it sometimes just as a mental break, but sometimes it gets, an hour later and I've just wasted a bunch of time. And so I think that's something that's going to be a challenge for this next generation, especially, is how to set healthy limits on distractions.
Yep. Excellent. Anyone else want to add anything?
Yeah, I have one. I think sometimes people get stuck in a place where they're complaining and it's not in a productive way. And that for me, I'm not willing to sit in that space. If we're finding a way to move through it or finding, other solutions, that's fine. If they want to complain, I reach my limit with that very quickly. And, I feel I'm not alone. I'm looking at the reactions.
But my old roommate, Alex, used to have a very funny way of responding to that. He would say to somebody, I hear complaining about it helps. And it would shut people down like every time. He would do that. He was so good at it. He was a complaining boundary teacher. So yes, excellent. I'm glad somebody brought up complaining. Other things we might consider is gossiping, just not engaging or letting somebody, dump their gossip on you. We might set boundaries on people who make endless excuses to avoid responsibility. So people that keep pretending to be victims and just trying to get people to feel bad for them without taking any action or responsibility, we might want to set a boundary on being a part of that. People that keep distracting you to waste your time, people that are just being selfish or using people, making disrespectful comments or criticisms, people that pressure you to be a certain way, like pressure you to drink, pressure you to do drugs, whatever. Somebody who goes through your emails, text messages, or,
invades privacy.
Yeah, invading privacy. People who disrespect your spiritual beliefs, your values, your lifestyle choices, your cultural customs. Could even be setting a boundary on like a client who falls behind on payments or something like that. Like there's a lot of different ways we can set boundaries. Now, we're going to get into
You forgot the most important one, Brendan.
What's that?
When people touch your crap and don't put it back where it belongs. That is terrible. And it's not OCD. It's called put shit back where it belongs. That's what it's called. I don't care if my kids, my wife, whatever, touch my stuff. Just put it back where it was. You went out and found it, so you know where it goes. So just put it back there. I don't take your knife and go stick it like in the driveway when it goes in the knife drawer. That's the most important one. I can't believe we failed to recognize that.
Yeah.
As you were.
Yeah. So clearly somebody borrowed Steve's Superman cape and didn't return it back into his drawer. So tonight he has to wear regular pajamas to bed.
Terrible. Terrible.
Yeah.
But you know, that is a real one though. Like I actually
Yeah.
had a neighbor many years ago that I lent them like my sawhorses, you know, and they were plastic, they weren't metal or whatever, but you know, brought them back broken and didn't say anything. And if he had said, hey man, sorry, I broke this, I would have been like, oh, that's cool, right? But I find it hard to believe that he didn't know that he broke it and that he returned it and didn't say anything. And to me, that's just very rude.
Yeah,
you know,
there's
to do that
an etiquette to borrowing. I believe you
Yeah.
should
My mom told me when I borrowed my buddy's truck in high school one time, she's like, okay, you're going to wash the truck and then you're going to go fill the gas tank and return it to him, in better condition than you found it, because, he did you a solid. And so that's how you show your appreciation, right? You don't send it back with the gas tank empty and, your trash and soda cans and that stuff in it. So, it's just showing respect to someone when you respect their belongings.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Let's go into how to set boundaries now. The actual statement. Now, this is applied from Nancy Levin was the coach who used this line, and I thought she did a wonderful job with it. So I just applied her format here. Is to set a boundary, we craft a sentence in this way. We say, I feel, this is key. When we say I feel, then it's not like we're making a grandiose statement about what's right and what's wrong. We're saying I feel, which is real to us. So it kind of shuts down the argument over what's actually right and wrong. So it's just basically like, I feel, then we insert emotion. And for the emotions, you could say, I gave a list here that are most common when I'm coaching people through setting boundaries, like anxious, attacked, awkward, chaotic, discouraged, disrespected, distracted, dismissed, disrupted, disturbed, again, embarrassed, frustrated, hurt, ignored, inadequate, guilty, overwhelmed, sad, scared, taken advantage of, threatened, uncomfortable, unsafe, unsettled, vulnerable, whatever. I have to give a list because I find when I'm coaching people how to set boundaries, they can't articulate their feelings very well. They're like, I don't know what the word is. So I like to give a whole bunch. So I feel when you do, and then we just describe the action. It could be like breaking a commitment, bringing a disturbing energy to the situation, criticizing, invading privacy, lying, making up stories, making me feel bad, mistreating, swearing, trying to control me, yell at me, whatever, right? And in order to take care of myself, I'm going to, and then we clarify the boundary. Now, this is important. This line here, in order to take care of myself. What this does is it immediately gets people to honor your boundary because they want you to take care of yourself.
And it's a form of self-care, like we talked about early on.
Exactly. So I love this line. I feel when you do, so in order to take care of myself, I'm going to, and insert boundary, right? Now, we're not judging their action. We're not saying it's wrong when you do this, you shouldn't do that, because then they'll feel negatively judged and they're going to start persecuting you or doing something. We're making it all about how you feel, right? It's just like, these are my feelings. This is what's going on. And in order to take care of myself, this is what I got to do, right? If you make it obvious that they're the problem and they're in the wrong, they'll often get triggered and they can be more difficult to deal with. Now, there's a caveat to all this. If somebody is a narcissist, they won't respond to boundaries very well, because in a narcissist reality, nobody matters but them, okay? If somebody is an abuser, they won't respond to this line well because they're all about crossing boundaries. The only people who are going to really complain about you crossing boundaries are the ones who benefited from crossing your boundaries, right? Narcissist, abuser. And then if somebody is like just a complete jerk, right? So if somebody doesn't honor you setting a boundary in this way, then that's a red flag. Because when you do it in this way, it is respectful. It does allow for the possibility that you are wrong, but this is how you feel. And in order to take care of yourself, this is what you're going to do. You're not necessarily calling the other person wrong or saying what they're doing is inappropriate. It's just you showing up different. So what we're going to do now is we want to craft sentences using that structure. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to give you all a situation, and I want you to write into the chat your boundary statement on it. Okay? So that because we're going to have to do a couple reps on this. Okay? So here's what I want you to imagine. Imagine you have a parent who keeps phoning you during the workday and it's hurting your productivity. It's distracting you. You can't focus. How might you communicate that boundary? So remember, say, I feel, insert the emotion. When you do, insert their action. And in order to take care of myself, I'm going to, and communicate a boundary. So put it within that sentence. I just want you to come up with whatever that emotion might be. Okay. For a parent that keeps phoning you during the workday. Let's see if you can craft a boundary sentence here. It'll get easier every time you do it. So I feel, what would be the emotion if they keep calling during the workday? Right? Maybe you'll say distracted. Maybe you'll say, you know, I feel a little disrupted, a little overwhelmed. Whatever word you want to use. So anxious, yeah. So we got some excellent examples here. Steve says, I feel anxious when you call me at work. In order to take care of myself, I'm going to let your call go to voicemail and respond after work. 10 out of 10. You nailed it. Okay. Patty said a similar thing. I feel distracted when you call me, so I'm going to let you go to voicemail. I feel this. Charmaine said,
Patty's on my team.
Yeah. Everyone's saying that. Or you can say, or Chris has a good one here. He said, I feel, he forgot to insert the motion. Distracting. And he said, call me after 5 or I'll call you after 5. So, and if it's emergency, call 911. Perfect. So we got some good statements here on how to set a boundary, right? Carrie said, distracted. I will only take your calls at the end of the day. Perfect. So simple, so succinct. And it's going to be easy for someone to want to honor that. Because like, hey, you feel that way? Okay, in order to take care of yourself, I get it. Sure. Thank you for letting me know. That's how a normal person's going to respond. A narcissist, why you want to just make it about you? What about me? So once again, pay attention to how people respond to the boundary setting. All right. So all of you pass on that one there. Now, number 2. Imagine you have a family member who gets upset about the smallest things and they start shouting at everybody. How might you communicate that boundary? So a family member gets upset about the smallest things and starts shouting at you and shouting at everybody. Remember, I feel, insert what your emotion might be when you shout at everybody and get upset, right? And in order to take care of myself, I'm going to, and then clarify what you think the appropriate boundary is on that. Right? So think about what the feeling might be. It might be, I feel attacked. I feel discouraged. I feel hurt. Right? We're scared. You get all angry at all of us. And then what boundary might you set there that's appropriate? So
I'm typing the new answer.
Okay. So Steve said, I feel angry when you overreact and yell at the family. And in order to take care of myself, I am going to fight you. Okay, so he said, ask you firmly to stop. Another thing could be, like Chris says, finish him. Another thing could be, I am going to stop the conversation until you calm down. I am going to leave the room. I'm going to distance myself from you. Charmaine says, I'm going to leave the house when you get this way, whatever it is. Sweep the leg. Steve, good takedown move. Carrie, perfect textbook answer. Upset and angry. I feel anxious when you get upset and angry. In order to take care of myself, I'm going to leave the room and not engage with you when you're like this or until you calm down. Perfect. Love it. So we're just saying, like, this is what we won't tolerate. Another thing is when people get angry and upset and yell, we also know that they become temporarily brain damaged. When somebody's really angry and they lose their inner peace, their sense of judgment and fairness is completely thwarted. They become very unreasonable, irrational. You can't teach them new things. It's like talking to a wall, right? So we're always better to wait till they're in their rational mind before we have any sort of a meaningful conversation, right? Usually just things that people end up resenting are said. So Okay. Now, here's another one, example number 3. We're going to go on another one now. Imagine you have a coworker and they make false accusations about you to make you look bad. How might you communicate a boundary? So somebody's making up stuff about you to make you look bad at work, right? This is a more heavy one, right? Somebody like, so first of all, how might you feel if somebody's doing that? Think of the emotion. If somebody's like making up stuff about you to make you look bad, anxious, attacked, right? Disrespected.
And then do you give examples in this, or you just blanket statement that out?
You could say when you make false accusations, you could just say that straight up. It's on them to prove you wrong in that anyway. But
Because it's your feeling, right?
Yeah.
So you're not having to defend or protect that position by giving examples.
No, you don't have to.
Yeah.
So
Because I think at some point, for most people, and you gave this example of narcissist abusers, flat out jerks, they're loving the fact that they're setting, that they're pushing your boundaries because they're getting what they want. There's a benefit out of it for them. But other people, they may just be innocent in that they don't realize that they're pressing up against a boundary, and therefore they don't know how they're doing that.
Yes. Yeah.
So when you're telling them that they're saying mean things about you, they're like, what do you mean I'm saying mean things about you? My name's Steve Smith and I'm just direct. I'm sorry if you're taking that the wrong way. I never
Stop
said
sucking at life and we don't have to have this conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, or maybe they're just like, wow, I didn't realize I was doing that. When am I doing that? Like, like at what stage do you explain that out? Or, when you do this, I feel this, you are expecting that they realize that they're doing that. And there's, I never lied to you. Okay. But
well, that's going to be more of a narcissist that way. So take a look at Charmaine's sentence. She did an excellent job on this one.
Okay.
Charmaine says, I feel humiliated that you made false accusations against me in front of others. In order to take care of myself, I will share the evidence I have to defend myself. If you're the person who made the accusation, you'd be like, holy crap, what did I do? Poor Charmaine, and she handled it so responsibly. A normal, rational person is right now going to take accountability on this, right? An irrational narcissist is going to be like, I didn't do anything. What are you talking about? Like, that's where you're going to get like somebody who's a jerk. You're not going to be able to set boundaries with a jerk, right? Like they pride themselves. They see it as a source of pride to not be changed by anybody, right? So that's where you're just going to look at how do they respond and what kind of a person are you dealing with.
Yeah, I think that's good though, that this sentence structured like this is going to separate the wheat from the chaff, right? Like you're gonna tell, like you were saying, which I think is part of the beauty of it, because number one, it's going to put the boundary where you need it to be. But number two, it's going to tell you, is this a person I'm going to deal with anymore? Or am I done with you, right? Because the narcissist, the liar, all those types of people, when they react and reveal themselves, I'm done. I don't have time for these a-holes in my life. I don't. Yeah. If it is, someone that is like, oh crap, I didn't know, or, hey, I'm sorry, or, I thought it was okay, or whatever, then you've just opened up a dialogue, and you haven't kicked a door open. You've slowly opened a door, that you can have that. But that really kind of tells you, as you are, separating the people. I like the fact that there's not some other step to then go identify, do I need to get rid of this negative person in my life or whatever? They're going to reveal themselves.
Yeah. And when you do have a narcissist person that's not going to respond, then the key is you use minimum necessary force to protect yourself. So you would say, okay, if this is a person at work, well, I'm going to be filing an HR complaint and submitting all the information to expose exactly what you're doing. And I'm going to be doing that immediately. because, you know, this is inappropriate. That's what you might do. Minimum necessary force. Or if it's somebody who's like being physically violent and you're like, I communicated my boundary, they dismissed it, you call 911. Like you can't, you want to use minimum necessary force on that boundary if they're not going to be reasoned with, right?
Yeah, I think you are absolutely right about what Charmaine did in this particular instance, because there's wiggle room in the understanding of humiliation, right? Because that kind of gets a little bit subjective one way or the other, you know, and what they value as, or what they see as being humiliated or whatever that looks like, you know, and being talked to behind someone's back. And so I really like how Charmaine did articulate that, to add that in the end, you know, with the firmness that goes with it. So I can see where there are instances where you may need to do that when you're building out, you know, your this formula sentence, right, in order to put this together, just depending upon what the situation is. Lying, if you're lying, right? But humiliation, okay, now we're getting a little bit.
Right, but I
And-
think that
and-
was a good example, Brendan, because, you know, if this is a friend or a roommate, you know, or someone like that, you know, that you might be able to easily cut this person off and go, hey, you know, we're done, you know, based on how you responded, we're done. But if it's a coworker, you can't necessarily get rid of, you know, just avoid that person. You may be in the same department, you may be working on the same project. So, you know, if this is just a friend that is lying or anger or, you know, won't take responsibility, you can kind of cut those people off, right? We can block their numbers, we can block them on social media, that kind of thing. But a coworker, like, we've all had bad coworkers, right? We've all been in this situation. So, you know, I think that was a good example, because that makes it a little more difficult, where you can't just break the wrist and walk away like Napoleon Dynamite, right? You can't, you may have to still have a working relationship unless this escalates, like we've said, you know, like Charmaine did. So that's, I think that was a really good one to
Yeah.
have, because it's not an easy break.
Yeah.
Something I didn't say earlier, but one thing about when people know where you stand, a lot of times you're not confronted with as many challenging situations, because people know not to mess with you, or they know what you won't go along with, so they don't even try, and they target other people.
That's such a good point. That's such a good point. When people know where you stand, they target others. They leave you alone and target others. They leave you alone and target others. So there's less discomfort from it, right? And then others get to learn that very rewarding lesson about how to set boundaries eventually.
Good thing we've got a recording they can watch.
Right.
That's just like at school with a bully, no? Like, I remember when I was a kid, this kid must have bullied me for 2 weeks, but he was like half my size. It didn't really make a lot of sense. And then one day I kind of lost my temper and I threw him into a locker, and I just made him realize I'm bigger than you. Well, he stopped bugging me, started bugging my friend. And then my friend did the same thing to him. And eventually he just found those people that he constantly tormented.
Yeah, there you go.
Right. But I was no longer in it. It was, I don't
Yeah.
think I,
So you just went around like a pinball machine.
Yeah.
But anyway, now, and you know, an alternative could be like, okay, well, you got an HR department here for accountability. Well, what happens if it's a family member that's doing this, right? You may have to separate yourself and distance yourself from family get-togethers and things until they take responsibility on what they've done. Or, you know, you can make it clear, like, here's the evidence on what's been done and what's true and not true, and people will take their sides or do whatever they're going to do, and you can stay distant from all of it. There's no rule that you have to put up with emotional abuse and everything else just because you're family, right? So spirit is thicker than blood. Just find your spirit family, you know?
On that point of view, though, if people know you're not going to be silent, a lot of times they won't risk putting you in that position. Like, if they know, look, I'm not going to say anything, but if you put me in this position, you know, I will speak the truth and everybody will hear it. It's not a private conversation anymore. And a lot of times that's enough to stop people.
Yep. Yes. Excellent. Excellent. Well said. Now, the next thing we're going to do is go on to another example. I want you to imagine this. Imagine you have a boyfriend or girlfriend that overdrinks and gets very disorderly after the third drink. Okay. I want you to set a boundary on that. Okay. Boyfriend or girlfriend that overdrinks and gets very disorderly and offensive after a third drink. This is our next example. So
Bye, Felicia.
how might you set an example on that? So think about it. You might say something like, I feel uncomfortable and vulnerable, you know, so in order to take care of when you overdrink, so in order to take care of myself, if you go for the third drink, I'm leaving the room, right? You might say something like that. You might say, if you plan on having 3 drinks or more, then count me out. You know? And, or I'm going to drink all your drinks on you, so you can't, as Chris says. So here's the thing. What if somebody crosses the boundary and plays dumb? Let's say you do this. You say, okay, I feel like really kind of like uncomfortable when you have too much alcohol. So in order to take care of myself, if you go for the third drink, I'm going to go to the other room. What happens if this happens? So they go for the third drink and you go to leave and they're like, hey, where are you going? Like this. How might you respond and remind them of the boundary? Because people will do this. When you set a boundary, they will play dumb and cross the boundary. How might you respond and remind them of the boundary? I want you to just write down that. So this is a different level of boundary skill setting. How might you respond if they cross that boundary? What would you say? Right? So, Carrie, that's a good example. So if they say, oh, where are you going? What might we say? How might we reinforce that boundary? Well, here's something to think about. You might say to them, remember, I told you when you have more than 2 drinks, I feel uncomfortable. And that if you go for the third drink, I'm going to leave. You just say, remember, I told you, if you have more than 2 drinks, I feel uncomfortable. And if you go for the third drink, I'm going to leave. That's it. You just say, remember, I told you, and then you just repeat your boundary line. That's it. Right? This is not time to like, we're not debating it or anything else. It's just like, hey. So, Carrie, excellent. I clearly explained how I felt when you drink more than 2 drinks. I can reiterate it another time when you're not drinking. Excellent. Well said. Very respectful. You know, the one thing I really like about Carrie's answers, they're all so smart, but so respectful. Carrie, you definitely have the coaching tact.
It's a
The
character
HR
flaw.
background.
Oh, is that why the HR background? I'm just like, holy smokes, Carrie, your responses are so well crafted on everything. My goodness.
Funny, you Fox, putting myself in the shoes, thinking like saying it in this actual conversation. I'm amazed of how much it is I don't say that I feel gets the message across. Like a lot of the nonverbal communication that makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. So let's go on to another example here. Let me see which one I want to go next. I have a whole bunch. We're not going to go through all of them. But okay. Yeah. All right. How about this? I want you to imagine you work for a company. Okay. Imagine you work for a company. Here's a good HR one, Carrie. And they keep making extra demands on you and asking for you to do work outside of the times you're supposed to be available without extra compensation. And they start doing it more and more, asking for more and more work, weekends, evenings, blah, blah. And it's outside of your compensation, it's outside of your job description, right? How might you set this boundary? Now, remember, this is sensitive because this is your employer, right? And or your manager, the person that's overseeing you. So we want to do this in a tactful way. How might you set a boundary on this? Okay.
Can you just explain it out one more time?
Yeah. Imagine you work for a company and they keep making extra demands on you, asking for you to do work outside of the times you're supposed to be available without extra compensation. And, you know, we're getting into a work-life balance thing here, and this wasn't what you signed up for and everything else. How might you, now this is going to take some skill to craft this one, right? What might be the emotion we're going to throw in there? I feel, what might fit here? You might say overwhelmed, right? That might work. I don't know if I'd say taken advantage of, even if you feel that way. You don't want to imply that on them. You want to give them the opportunity to save face here. They might just be like really ambitious and just might have lost perspective. You want to give them some credit. This is your employer. Give them some credit, right? You know? So, Chris kind of made a good point. He kind of implied that, you know, you might say something like, I feel overwhelmed with all the extra work I'm being asked to do. And then we might put a boundary on our availability, right? So we might say something like, and in order to take care of myself, I'm going to communicate the precise times I'm available. Done. It could even be in your email signature. I'm available Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Not available on weekends, blah, blah. So message me, I'll get back to you on Monday, whatever it is. Right? Steve said, I feel overwhelmed when, with my workload increasing without conversation in order to take care of myself. I'll be, fulfilling my current job description, keeping within the boundaries of my current job description so that I don't, feel overwhelmed and burnt out. Right. So the key is just getting the word. I want to read what Carrie wrote because Carrie will have like the perfect wording on this. Right. I feel overwhelmed when the expectations at work exceed normal expected working hours. Beautiful. That's what we were looking for, Carrie. Right. In order to meet the demands of the role as well as my personal responsibilities, I have to manage my time effectively. I cannot do work in the evenings or weekends. Okay, that was like the perfect sentence. So if this is us in real life, we just plagiarize what Carrie wrote. Okay? Her HR background and her life coaching background,
But I actually I don't know whether I heard you talking while I was writing, but the one about when you say this is when I'm free, you sort of put those I like that better. I can't remember where it was now. It said
I think it was Chris's. Basically, I was articulating Chris's response.
Yeah, I like that. I was sort of saying, I can, these are sort of some windows or pockets or something like that. I think that's even probably better than I can't in the evenings or weekends, like showing a little bit of flexibility.
Okay.
Carrie, we're gonna start hitting you up on some of these.
Yeah, that's fine. Anytime.
I want to share this one. Thank you for trusting me with these extra responsibilities and tasks. However, I need to make it clear that I am only available to work during regular hours and cannot do additional work without proper compensation. If you would like me to take these extra tasks, we will need to discuss appropriate compensation plan. Otherwise, I will have to prioritize my workload and focus on the designated responsibilities during work hours. This was the AI response.
Oh my God.
I was like, what are you reading? I will have to. That was-
So there was no, I feel anything when you anything. It was a thank you. Here's the meat of it. I need more money if you want me to do more. And
Yeah,
otherwise,
I was gonna say it sounded a little cold and clinical, like, but you know, it sounded like a robot wrote it in a way. There was no feelings and emotions there.
You can change
Yeah.
that. You can say, hey, make it sound like it comes from Mother Teresa, and it'll like literally
right.
completely change that. It's the cool
Yeah.
part.
There you
Make
go.
it sound
So,
like it came from Chuck Norris.
Yeah,
had I put
exactly.
in there and add some feeling to it, I would have got it fluffed out, right? But go ahead, Charmaine.
Yeah,
I was
I love it.
because I was like, Patty, I don't like it. I don't know how to tell you.
Yeah. Right. This was the AI response, and all I did was just copy and paste exactly what Brendan had said and put in there just to see what the response was. And I wanted to make a point that AI is good for maybe getting a little bit of language, but we miss the feeling portion if we're not really careful. Like David said, you can get it to craft nearly anything that you want, but at the end of the day, it really you really have to be sensitive, you know, and put the feeling part in this.
Okay, love it. Love it. So there's many other examples that obviously we can craft boundary setting lines to. A client delays payment to you. You know, you might say, I feel, you know, a little mistreated when you delay payment. In order to take care of myself, I'm going to enforce a payment schedule with everything paid for in advance or whatever, right? Like you can put it in your email signature in addition. You know, you could have like an ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend that keeps reaching out to you, even though they haven't changed their ways, you know, and you could say, look, I feel dismissed that you keep reaching out without having changed your ways. You know, I'm going to block communication in order to take care of myself. I'm going to block communication until you prove you've changed or whatever, right? So there's a whole bunch of different ways we might craft just using this simple formula. Now, here's the thing. Some people won't respect your setting a boundary. And just like being at a vending machine, when you put your money in and you hit a button and you don't get what you want, you start pushing any button to try to get anything, right? And so when you don't give in and you set a boundary, they will try to push buttons using guilt, shame, or humiliation tactics. Be on the lookout for this. They can't be reasoned with. They're going to try to find an angle to make you feel selfish, guilty, humiliated. Charmaine, have you ever experienced that?
Oh yeah.
There you go. So Charmaine, you can speak from experience. Yes, this is what you have to expect. You have to expect this is a part of the journey. Just know that, you know, they cannot be reasoned with in many cases. We need someone who has the capacity to respond with grace. Some people can't help being jerks. Okay, a part of them knows they're a jerk and they just can't help it. It's not your job to fix them. Not everybody is your assignment. People who behave badly often can't be changed with kindness. Better to use dignity and distance yourself and let the real world be their master disciplinarian.
Or a 2x4.
Okay. There's somebody you don't want to cross a boundary with. So if they're not helping you and you're not helping them, what's the point? So much power and freedom when you can acknowledge a relationship no longer serves you and walk away. Just be ready because people will test you to see how serious you are on your boundaries. If you don't follow through, they won't respect your boundaries because you don't even respect them, right? So it's going to be a game of, can I get you to drop your boundaries? Now, the one thing we have to be aware of is chronic people pleasing. You know, how we often package ourselves to be more digestible to other people, more over agreeable and over accommodating with all of their garbage, right? But just make sure that when you're saying yes to others, you're not saying no to your true self and betraying your true self. So be willing to consider your own needs in the equation. You can always just say, thanks so much for thinking of me. I'm not available. That's an easy way to say no. People will make a million demands on you. If you become a chronic people pleaser, that's a quick line. Thanks so much for thinking of me. I'm not available. Don't tell them why you're not available. They'll try to talk you out of it. You just repeat, I'm not available, right? So here's where we want to go next with this. Boundary Bootcamp 1 week challenge, okay? I'm going to challenge everyone. Practice crafting boundary sentences. You don't even have to say anything yet. Just notice when you want to set a boundary on something, when you feel resentment, and practice crafting those sentences. I feel emotion when you do action. And in order to take care of myself, I'm going to clarify the boundary, right? Just practice crafting those sentences. That's step one. All right. Practice crafting them. If you have any of those resistances, work through those correctives of perspectives. If you fear rejection, really try to take that attitude shift and know it in your bones, assimilate it in your atoms. You need to replace some of those disempowering attitudes that keep you trapped in the spell of suffering. If you still have a resistance to setting a boundary, if some part of you thinks it's a good idea to let people walk all over you, right? So, and in conclusion, just know that, you know, if you've experienced people crossing your boundaries, you're probably innocent. You were probably never properly trained on setting boundaries. How many people here have ever been part of a conversation or training like this where somebody clarified, this is how you set a boundary, this is how you do it, this is when you do it, anything like that? Show of hands? Nobody. Okay. Okay, one person. Yeah. It's not common that we get this kind of training, right? Just remember to practice self-care. This can be a difficult and draining process. So keep up some of your self-care practices if you are setting boundaries. Remember that it is not about anyone else changing. Most of the times they won't. Most of the times they take pride in the fact that they don't change. So it's not up to anyone else to respect, honor, or uphold your boundaries. It's yours and yours to maintain. It's all about you. And the people who will be upset about you setting boundaries are the people who benefit from crossing your boundaries. That's it. But you control your response on this. That's all that matters. Don't betray yourself on this, right? So, final thoughts, key takeaways on boundary setting.
Okay.
Can I bring up the situation I had? Because I would like your perspective on it.
Perfect. Yeah, of course.
Okay. And I was on the receiving end of a boundary, but I was kind of pushing back on it. I have a friend, we've been friends for years and really, really close. Someone's in my life every day and does not like to receive gifts. And we've had this rule forever. And I am not a gift giver, so it hasn't really bothered me. But every now and then something comes along that's absolutely perfect and I think they need it. And in this particular case, they weren't selling it anymore. And, you know, I felt compelled to buy it for this person, but I wouldn't because I knew he had this boundary. And so I talked to him about it. And I really think that, you know, I should have this 5% leeway and he can respect that I can make a judgment call in some situations. And, you know, it's one of those things where we were kind of colliding on this idea about gifts. And again, I've known him for years and this is the first time it's been an issue. But I feel like it's not respecting the relationship if you can't even have that conversation because someone just draws a boundary without even a discussion. And this is maybe, and I hear things about people dealing with gifts. So, but that's not kind of like lying or something that's easier for me to understand a hard line on.
Okay. So let's break it down.
Yeah.
Very easy. What's the emotion you feel about this whole situation?
I feel like I can't be myself. I feel frustrated and I feel like my hands are tied behind my back, you know, like I can't make a decision without violating how he feels. And it's making me feel inauthentic to myself.
Yeah. So you might say, I feel inauthentic, right? When you do, and what would be the action? How would you describe it?
Draw such a hard line about giving gifts like 100% of the time, like there's no wiggle.
Yeah, when you draw such a firm boundary on how, so it's a boundary on you giving gifts to him, correct?
He doesn't want anybody giving him gifts.
Okay, so, you know, and one of the ways I've communicated this, actually, somebody communicated this to me, sorry. I used to like give all the time and not really like bother to receive anything. And then somebody's like, you know, it's really selfish for you to like give all the time to everyone else and you don't let anyone else have the joy of giving to you. And I'm like, well, now that I look at it that way, I'm going to accept more gifts, right? So, but that's a different way of looking at it. Let other people have the joy of giving, right?
And I've shared that with him and he can't argue with it, but he still has trouble being open to receiving.
Okay. So you feel inauthentic when he sets a firm boundary on gifts, right? So in order to take care of yourself, what's the boundary you're willing to set here?
Well, that was hard. I did have someone give me some advice that is what we're doing now. And I get the joy of telling him, this is what I bought you in my mind. And I can send it to him and I can say, are you going to buy it on my behalf now? That kind of thing, which I thought was a beautiful solution, but I didn't come up with it on my own.
Okay. So in order to take care of myself, I'm going to imagine buying you things and run it by you, and that's it. There you go. There you go. The intent is there. It's really funny. And I do like that one because you're still honoring his boundary, right? But what I do like about that one is when you take the look at the work of Dr. Gary Chapman on the love languages, the main idea with gifts is it's all about the thought behind it.
Yeah.
Right. So at least it shows you're thinking about someone and that you have this intent. I saw this beautiful thing and I was thinking of you and how much I would have liked to have gotten it for you. So anyway, just letting you know. Perfect. You're showing that loving intent and you don't have to follow through in a materialistic way.
And that's it's like an inside joke too, So we both
Yeah.
get joy out of it.
That's a very nuanced one for sure. That's a very nuanced one. I'm glad you brought that one up.
I went ahead tonight as my key takeaway, and while everyone else was doing the exercises, I went ahead and crafted my own to a friend of mine and wrote, I feel when you, and in order to care for myself, I'm going to. And this was the response. Oh, Patty, I am so sorry. That was not my intent. I deeply apologize for my lack of self-awareness in making you feel, copied the feelings that I had there, right? I will correct that immediately. And I'm glad that you feel comfortable enough to tell me your thoughts and feelings.
Now, did he write that or did AI write that? I'm just kidding.
Right? Right? Who knows?
Hey, that is beautiful.
I can take criticism and correct behaviors accordingly. However, I don't want to just tell you, I will show you.
Wow, that's amazing.
So this tells me that not oftentimes are people pressing boundaries because they know that they are, right? And that sometimes they don't know that they are. And if we don't communicate well, we can hold resentment unknowingly because we're not communicating that with, a friend.
And
whatever,
also
a family member.
You can become more reckless in crossing boundaries if nobody ever corrects you. So what you did helped this person raise their self-awareness. The way they responded was like an angel, right? So it's like,
Right?
that shows you the character of this person, because we're saying like a narcissist abuser, they're going to try to justify, they're going to turn the table, guilt, shame tactics, humiliation tactics. But that's the exact outcome we're hoping for in Boundary Bootcamp, helping each other be better.
Well,
Wow.
I think that's a good point too, that we can't really work off the assumption that everyone's trying to push the envelope as far as they can, right? Like I look at Bentley, right? My little grandson that lives here, and he's almost 2 years old, and that kid is trying to find his independence, right? He's pushing boundaries as little kids do, right? And he's trying to learn and, that kind of thing. And so, but that's a lot different with adults. And the thing is, with all of our different interactions with family, close friends, intimate partners, acquaintances, neighbors, there's not even like set boundaries for the same category that a person falls into, right? So it's all of this, where is it at? And we kind of bounce through, I think, a lot because no one really talks about this or trains on this. So you don't necessarily know that you've, crossed that. And so when someone has the courage to tell you and you're like, oh crap, I am so sorry. I did not know I was purposely crossing that, right? Or the narcissist of, yeah, well, I'm going to do it again, or, screw. And so I think that's just, I think of all of the, training through Tony Robbins and all this other stuff and all the things that we've discussed over the last couple of years now. And, this may have been a discussion in our group before and I might have missed it, but, this is something where I've never heard anything crafted in a way to be delicately delivered and then identify which camp is that recipient in, right? So that I know how to further, maneuver with them. And, so I think also too, it just makes me kind of think, I need to be a little more cognizant of, signals or even asking somebody, hey, if this is too much, if, whatever, let me know, kind of thing, because we don't really address it. And if none of us know how to do it, none of us are going to do it delicately and effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Giver or taker, like receiver, whatever, like we're just not. So
we're all just stepping on each other's feet in the dance of life.
Right.
So boundaries help us be better. Right? My goodness, this human comedy show. This is a cosmic comedy show at times with how we're doing this kind of stuff. Love it. Chris, final thoughts, key takeaways.
Well, I think Steve has a very valid point about how people respond to boundaries. And you can also look at how they respond to it can be a tell into what their agenda is in the conversation. That if they're like, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that hurt you, let me not do it again, you can see that they genuinely care and they want to continue on in a different way. If they start to defend, deflect, explain, rationalize, then they're not ready to take responsibility for it. So you can kind of, it shows you where their priorities are with the relationship, or because they're more not narcissistic, but they're not ready to take responsibility for it. If it's just like, I don't care, I'm just going to continue to push my point across, then you have a problem on your hands.
Mm-hmm.
So I think by them rubbing up against how they respond to your boundaries really exposes them for what their long-term interest in the relationship is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We did a conversation, I think it was Love Dragons, how to love difficult people. And it was all like, the concept is that if you have a pet dragon, you can't love it too close. It's going to burn you. It's a dragon. Every time you get close, it'll eventually burn you. But it's like, but you can love it at a safe distance. And sometimes there's people in our lives, if they don't respond well to our boundary setting, we have to still, the higher thing is to love, but to love at a safe distance for their good and for your own, regardless of all other things. Like sometimes, usually it's people that are family and whatever, right? But it's
Right.
like loving them at a safe distance and knowing that, right? They're just like pet dragons.
Right. But it's great that'll expose them for the dragon that they are. So you can identify that as such and act accordingly.
We can get greater clarity, and so we can manage it best moving forward. Charmaine, did you have something to add too?
Yeah, I had an insight in this, just kind of in the way I've had some of these conversations in the past. I think one of the beauties of doing it this way is you start with vulnerability and you start with your feelings. Because a lot of times I think whatever you say first is what the receiving person latches onto. And I've had moments of having these conversations, and even though it has the same components, if they're only hearing the situation first, they get locked in, they can't really hear the feeling part sometimes. And so we're too busy discussing the semantics of what actually happened, instead of, if they hear the feeling first and they hear us being vulnerable first, they're more willing to receive the criticism or, the facts around how you got hurt, and more open because they're concerned about your feelings then, instead of feeling like I'm being told I did something wrong. And so I think just the beauty of the way that's constructed and me realizing I need to go first and be vulnerable before I even open up the situation. It's a totally different way to approach it. And it feels harder, but I think it actually sets the tone better.
Yeah, it's a nuanced thing, and much credit to Nancy Levin. She wrote the book The Art of Change, and a number of the concepts in today's discussion were applied from her. A bunch was stuff I've come up with over the years, and her way of crafting it was, I thought, brilliant. When I read it, I was like, this is it. This is how we do it. This is it's right here. But you're right. That is a big point, that we lead with the emotion, which nobody's going to really argue with us on. They're like, I guess that's how you feel. You would know. I can't argue the point, right?
Well,
It
then
takes away that debate.
caring. They're caring for you instead of feeling threatened by you, which if you
Mhm.
lead with how they made you feel, well, if you lead with the action part, that caused the feeling, then they're just worried about defending themselves usually.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. All right, Cootsie Patootie, final thoughts, key takeaways.
Yeah, it's some good notes there. I actually love that last one you said there. Love at a safe distance. I think everybody probably knows somebody somewhere that should probably take that to heart. And I just kind of liked it as well. Charmaine was mentioning, we start with, I put it here, expressing our emotions after we actually understand them. So kind of understand your emotions, express them immediately. And then from there, I was thinking kind of along the lines of like, how does someone do this well without like, going the wrong direction? I was thinking things kind of like tough love or kind candor are types of skills you may want to deploy while you're discussing these kinds of things. And know that this is for me, and yeah, those were sort of some of the things that I was rolling around, but I loved it. This is great, very interesting.
Excellent. And thank you all for tonight's discussion, because obviously this is a gift to benefit suffering humanity. What's more fulfilling than benefiting suffering humanity? I think that's
Petting raccoons.
Yeah. Did you see the video from today?
No, I haven't seen one. There's another one today, video YouTube.
Yeah. I went out to my car and there was a little raccoon and it was all nuzzling under my car. And then it started, it got out from under the car and started like hugging my leg. And so I made a post and I edited it all together and I called it Raccoon Car Mechanic. Because it looked like it was being, I'm like, I think it was like, because it had been storming, the baby raccoon was like cold. I think it was attracted to the warmth of being under my car, and then the warmth of my leg and whatever. And it was the cutest little guy. Anyway,
that's so funny.
Raccoon Car Mechanic. It's,
I'll take a look. That's awesome.
It's nuts. This is my life. It's nuts. All right. So, thanks to all of you. Honor all of you for being a part of this call and giving a gift to benefit suffering humanity. Setting boundaries is a big part of that. We're all in this journey together, stepping on each other's feet in the human experience, Steve. Right?
Yep,
So,
absolutely.
but we can all do what we can to help each other out and make it a better journey for all. So, count of 3, friends forever, enemies for never. Group hug, fist bump, we're out. All right. 1, 2, 3. Friends forever.
Friends forever, enemies for never.
Group hug, fist bump.